Thank you, Matt, for the kind introduction. And we did become a unicorn 2 years ago, and that was in 2021. And I remember that was really exciting, but it does feel like a really long time ago, because it does feel like the SaaS world is maybe tripping up a lot of us now. You know, whereas I think 2 years ago, it was all about growth. And because how many of you out here are SaaS entrepreneurs? Yes, quite a few of you. And or SaaS leaders? Yes, so almost all of us. And one more question, how many of you have a listing on G2? All of you? I would hope all of you. If you don't, you can start with a free listing. But I will come back to that. But you know what I really wanted to talk today about was it is a much tougher market, I think, for all of us. And I think right now, whereas 2 years ago, capital was already available, and if you did already have investors, I think 2 years ago they were just asking all of us, hey, just grow faster. And it really didn't matter if you were efficient. You just had to grow. And I think now, also my board, our investors, now it's like, yes, we want you to grow, but we want Rule of 40. We want you to do it efficiently. We want to do it in a smart way. And so we've also come up with a mantra at my company called Smart Growth. And the way we measure smart growth is how many dollars of ARR growth do we produce for each dollar we spend. And so I think that's how we measure it. And I think we have made that more and more important in terms of our priorities every year. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about the emotional part of entrepreneurship. And I have been building companies now for 25 years. And I think one of the things I love about entrepreneurship, it is an emotional roller coaster. And yesterday I got to speak to a smaller group of founders here, and I said sometimes I do think I'm a bit bipolar. Maybe not clinically, but I do think a lot of entrepreneurs, company builders, we share that because you have such tremendous highs, lows. And now I've been building companies for 25 years, and why am I still doing it? And I think somewhat I'm addicted to the highs and the lows, but I do also love the aliveness that it gives me. And my last company, SteelBrick, we were acquired by a much bigger company, Salesforce. And Salesforce is an incredible company. Mark Benioff, one of my ultimate entrepreneur idols. You know, Mark, the founder, CEO of Salesforce. But I still found when I was part of Salesforce integrating my last company, I honestly missed the highs and the lows. Because I was kind of running one product within a much larger company, but frankly, whether my product hit its plan that quarter or it didn't move the needle on the whole company, and so I just missed that immediate feedback, and also doing it with a team. And I do think that's also what's always been special for me as an entrepreneur, is doing it together with a team. And we do like to talk about our entrepreneurial family. And with that, I'm going to share a little bit more about what I have learned, how we are driving smart growth. But I first want to just share a little bit more about me. So I have been building SaaS companies now for 25 years. Well, the first company I started in 2000. It's called Big Machines. Eventually became Oracle CPQ, had a good outcome, but that was only after many years of struggle. And if this era reminds me of one thing in my career, it's probably more the 2001, 2002 post-dot-com bust, when there was also a big pullback in funding and in tech. After building Big Machines, we built another company in that world of CPQ, configure, price, quote. That was SteelBrick I just mentioned. That was acquired by Salesforce ultimately. And both of those companies really inspired us to build G2. And when I'm not working on building my company, I do love being outdoors with our family. And during the pandemic, we did move to Boulder, Colorado. Although this picture is actually in Utah, which many of you might recognize. But I love being outdoors. And now back to G2. So our vision from the beginning has been to build the trusted place you go for software. And when we started, our vision was we wanted to make it much easier for software buyers to discover the best apps. And we were betting on the trend of software eating the world, which Mark Andreessen said about 10 years ago, right when we were starting G2. And I do think what he said was prophetic. I think that's why we're all here. We're all creating software that solves unique business problems for either specific verticals, specific business functions. But the amazing thing now as a knowledge worker, as a software buyer, there's a purpose-built app for you. But the challenge we saw is how do you discover the right app that's going to best solve your business problem, and how do you trust that the solution, the company are going to take care of you? And we thought the thing that was missing in the industry was, at the beginning, we called it Yelp for software. But we just thought there was no good peer advice available. And our industry was kind of beholden to legacy analysts, Gartner, Forrester. And frankly, we didn't think their model could keep up with the tremendous growth and speed of innovation in software. And so that's why we started G2. And it's very exciting now. We do have about 80 million software buyers coming to G2 every year. And you can see they're coming from the US, they're coming from Europe, they're coming from Asia. And the cool thing about our industry, cloud SaaS, it has no borders. And so we're connecting software buyers and sellers all around the world. And we are excited. G2 does have the most share out of any software website. It is the place the most software buyers go. And we do believe that's because we have the most trusted reviews, over 2 million of them. And that's what software buyers want. But enough about G2. What I wanted to share a little bit more about is what have we learned over the past 25 years building these companies? And how can you now persevere and get stronger? And if there was really one lesson when I thought about this, I do think it's don't quit. And I'm borrowing there also from Ben Horowitz. Have you all read The Hard Thing About Hard Things? I think one of the best books about entrepreneurship, and Ben Horowitz now co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, big venture capital firm. But before that, he and Mark Andreessen together built a company called Opsware that frankly almost died, after the dot-com bust. And I think he does a really good job. I think so much of the startup, blogging and everything, it's all about success stories and about winning. But I really resonated with Ben Horowitz's story because, frankly, my first company was really hard. We almost died. We almost failed. And I do think having the emotional fortitude to persevere, to keep believing in your vision, to believe in your team, that ultimately I think that's the key to success. And I have seen a lot of ups and downs. So when I first, actually graduated from MIT, this is the NASDAQ inflation adjusted. And frankly, it was a great time to graduate in hindsight. And probably the greatest blessing of my life is that I got into the software industry. I got into tech because, when you look at it over 30 years, it's nothing but up and to the right. But then, our industry does go through a lot of peaks and valleys. And I think right now, we have been, I think it's been at least a year where there's been a significant slowdown in tech. Valuations have come way down. SaaS multiples, I think for a while they were up to 20. Maybe they're down to 5 to maybe 10. So it's a much tougher market. And it does remind me, I think the biggest downturn I saw was 01 to 03, after there was a big dot-com boom, very similar to, I think, 2021. In 1999, 2000, VCs were just throwing money at any internet company. Just like a couple years ago, they were almost throwing money at us in SaaS. But then now we're kind of dealing with the opposite, where investors are pulling back and are scared. But the one good thing is, I think what we've always seen in our industry, we always come out of it. But what can we do? What can we learn while we're in a downturn? And the first company, Big Machines, I did experience that extreme valley. And I remember Big Machines, I started January 1, 2000. And at the time, I think I was 28 years old. And I guess I was lucky. At that time, VCs were still tail-end.com era. They were willing to bet on clueless entrepreneurs. I fit the bill. I did recruit some smart, friends from MIT and from another startup where I was working to start the company. So that's why they gave us money. They thought, okay, the internet's brand new. You guys don't really know what you're doing, but nobody does. And so that first year was actually really exciting. Our vision was to help sell Big Machines, and it was inspired by my father. My father was in the pump manufacturing industry, and he lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I grew up through high school. And I remember I was already out in the Silicon Valley, but I went to visit my dad November 99, and I said, hey, how's the internet going to change your business? And he just said it's not. And I remember I was kind of coming out of the valley, the reality distortion zone. I'm like, what do you mean, Dad? And he just explained to me, look, my pumps, they're very big machines. They're very engineered. And we have to configure a different pump for every customer, for every quote, for every proposal. And you can't just sell it like a book on Amazon. And then I kind of had the vision. I saw what Dell was doing. And Dell in the 90s was selling, at the time PCs were probably more configurable. But you can configure a memory, hard drive, put together a custom PC online. And they were selling billions of PCs. And so I said to my dad, hey, how about if we build you what today you call a SaaS platform and help you sell your pumps online, just like Dell does. And that was a founding vision. I think it was a good idea, but then we learned it was way premature. And to fast forward 3 years later, we were almost bankrupt. And I remember I told investors, I think we raised all this money in 2000, raised $20 million, and I think I told them, 2001 we'll do 20 deals. We were doing big manufacturing deals, then we'll do 40 the next year, 80 the next year. In reality, I did 2, 3, and 2, so missed sales plan by over 90% 3 years in a row. That didn't feel good. And frankly, also investors at that point, they said, we're not going to give you any more money. And so it felt very dark. At this time, my wife and I, also right at the same time, we had twins who have just now turned 18. But I just remember it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I was failing at work, failing at life. And but we did persevere. And I think the reason we decided to persevere, my co-founder Chris and I, he was my best friend from MIT. But I think one, we just didn't want to quit on each other. And two, what did give us hope, we had about a dozen early customers, and they were having success selling in the cloud with our CPQ software. And it was very hard to convince other manufacturers to invest, though, because the cloud was totally unproven. And frankly, they thought we were going to go bankrupt. But those early customers, they were quoting 80% faster, and so we just said, eventually the market will come around, and we decided to stick with it. And a few years later, it did turn around. We partnered with Salesforce. We partnered with Oracle Siebel, which eventually acquired us. And then we were able to ride the cloud wave. But I think it really took us 7 years until we got in our groove. And that's why I say, to me, just not quitting, sticking with each other as a team, sticking with our customers is ultimately what led to our success. And fast forward to 2022, and I remember 2021, we became a unicorn. It was amazing. We were growing over 50% per annum. It seemed easy. Our investors just said, grow faster. And it was great until last May. And we do track all these internal measures. And I remember last May, all of a sudden, end of the month, we had a good forecast, good pipeline. All of a sudden, I think we missed plan by like 20%, seemingly overnight. And we do mainly serve tech marketing people. We have over 3,000 software vendors as our customers. But all of a sudden, we saw our ARR really start to drop. And we saw all the news, I'm sure you all saw, right? All of a sudden, funding was being pulled back. And a lot of our customers started to struggle. And whereas a year ago, they would make any investment in growth, including G2, all of a sudden they wouldn't. So that was an alarm bell. And then also we saw in the second half of last year where all of a sudden renewals got much harder, expansion got much harder. And I'm sure many of you saw that. And then I think the key also Ben Horowitz talks about is how do you face that reality and how do you adapt? And adapting, and I think we decided let's quickly shift to smarter growth. And what was also hard is, we had to reset expectations with our investors. I think we saw it in May, and then in June we had a board call, and we said, this feels horrible as a CEO. It's like, hey, that ARR growth plan I sold you a year ago, we can't do it anymore. And so we had to reset our plan, and we had to immediately pause hiring and start to also adapt our spend. Because we did then make that our number one goal. We said, hey, if we're going to grow more slowly, that's okay if we get more efficient. And so we slowed hiring, reduced our ARR plan, and scrutinized all our spend. And also, I think what does make me feel better as an entrepreneur, it's not just us, and I think we're all seeing this, but also Mark Benioff, I mentioned, he acquired our company Steelbrick, always been entrepreneur idol. And Mark, I think for the first 22 years of Salesforce was also just about growth, growth, growth. But even Mark, I think it's a recent earnings call where he said profitability is now our number one strategy, my number one strategy. And that was, I think a big, to me, bellwether that's now upon all of us, where this is what the market expects. And so we all have to lead differently. And what I have learned leading and surviving through these downturns, I think number one for me is you have to accept the change yourself. Look reality in the face, like all those plans I had 2 years ago, I'm not going to be able to execute them as fast. I have to accept that reality. And then secondly, I think also from you as a leader, and it can be hard, right, because you have all this fear, uncertainty, doubt about yourself, and I still hate missing plan. I've missed a lot of plans. But then how do you still convey confidence to your team, keep a steady hand at the rudder, so you adapt but you don't panic? We all have to get efficient, we have to adapt. And then the one I also love, though, Flucht nach vorn, and I was actually born in Germany. And I think I also learned this from my father. His business went through some tough times, but Flucht nach vorn means flee to the front. And, when kind of it feels like bombs are dropping around you and the world is ending, like how do you still keep that excitement, that energy, and take proactive actions, to be with your customers, to innovate, and to do even more, even in midst of all the noise. And being authentic, my daughter always inspires me. That's my daughter, Maddie. I think this was color day at elementary school. But I think she also always helps me be authentic because she calls out all my BS. And but she's always a wonderful reminder to also, feel my feelings, feel the sadness, feel the anger when things aren't going my way, but then accept it, be authentic with my team, and make the shift. And yes, don't panic. I also learned this from my daughter, Maddie. We were climbing Byers Peak in Colorado. And, about 1,000 feet from the summit, it's almost, I think it's a 13,000-foot peak, but there's all these rocks and rubble. And you have to kind of scamper up some rocks. I remember my wife said, wow, should we just turn back? We're close enough. And then my daughter said, no, let's go. And so I think keeping, even in midst, when you feel like you might fall off the mountain, you just keep going. Getting efficient, and I think Amazon has always been one of the very best about this. I think Bezos always says, hey, your customers, they always want it faster, they always want it cheaper. And so if we can make our own businesses more efficient, then we can deliver that to our customers. And adapting, and I don't know if, most of you probably know the story about Steve Jobs. He came back to Apple in like 1997. And Michael Dell, who I mentioned earlier, great entrepreneur, I think he said when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, somebody asked Michael Dell, and he was doing really well at the time. He's like, what should Steve do? He's like, well, he should give back the last $100 million that Apple has and shut it down. And obviously, in hindsight, that was bad advice. But I think what Steve did instead, he really quickly made really hard changes. Took Apple from 100 to a few products, made them really efficient, and started innovating, starting with that iMac, which obviously led to the iPod, the iPhone. But I think he made really quick changes. And yes, Flucht nach vorn. And I think even in midst, when you're getting more efficient, it's like what Mark Benioff does. You still host Dreamforce. You still go see your customers. You still innovate. And that's also what we're aiming to do at G2. And I do think one of the biggest opportunities for all of us right now is AI. And I think that's a real bright spot in our industry. But we've launched an AI Monty, built on top of ChatGPT. That's a virtual software buying assistant now. So please check it out. It's available on g2.com. And how do you thrive long term? Well, first, overall, we still see software spend going up. Half of businesses are still spending more on software, even in a tougher market. So there's demand out there. Overall, software, it's been amazing for the last 25 years. My career, it's going to continue. Yes, we're having a 1 or 2 year dip, but over 30 years, our industry is going to keep booming. And I think the one amazing opportunity even VC sees is generative AI. There have been, I think, 13 unicorns in that world. And while you can't all reposition as AI, I do think we can all take advantage of it to make our products better and make our companies more efficient. So with that, I'm just going to leave it and say, yes, the sunshine always returns. So don't quit. And let's get to our next peak together. Thank you.
Dude, time for some Q&A. Yeah, I'm just keeping it rolling.
Do we have Q&A?
Yes, all right, we got some
all right.
Q&A. Excellent, fantastic. Okay, first question. What does the future of G2 look like to close out this year?
I do think AI is a big part of the future of G2. And because I think G2, we traditionally have a very structured taxonomy. And you have to know what category of software you're shopping in. And I do think with AI now we can give buyers much better advice, guide them to the right products much more efficiently. And so I think this is the first year that AI is really going to start transforming software buying, and G2, we're going to help make that happen.
Wow. So like an AI virtual buying assistant?
Yes.
Maybe within the marketplace?
Yeah, so if you need software, Matt, just go to g2.com, and you can just tell Monty what you need. And the nice thing is you can just start with business requirements. You don't have to know you're shopping for CRM, right? You can just say, hey, I want to improve my sales forecasting. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And then Monty asks you more questions, like what size company do you work for? What industry are you in? And then it says, hey, based on your peers, here's 3 great ways to improve sales forecasting.
Wow. I love it. And how many of you guys excited about that? Are you guys excited about that? Like, that's what I'm talking about. Streamlining software buying. I mean, it's intelligence at its best. I love that. What are some of your favorite hacks for productivity or productivity habits?
I think to me, it's that energy management is more important than time management. And I think during my first company, I would just kind of stay up until like midnight, literally until I was falling asleep on my laptop.
Yeah.
My wife would like find me in the kitchen with eating a bowl of cereal, like my head on the laptop, half asleep. But frankly, the last 4 hours, I realized I wasn't productive at all.
Yeah.
And so now I try to optimize for energy, which includes like this morning I went for a beautiful run here along the lake. But taking care of yourself, meditating, exercising every day, and even if it seems like you don't have the time, I always find now if I take the time to do that, invest in my own energy, in self-care, then I get so much more done.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to me, is probably the most important one, is manage your energy, not your time.
Yeah. We feel like we have to just keep like pushing through.
Right.
Right? And making ourselves log in all these long hours and forcing ourselves to be productive, maybe drink another energy drink or something. But it's actually counterintuitive, right? Or at least counterproductive to productivity, if we can say that.
And it took me many years to learn. But I think a lot of times you're better off work 10 really good hours versus trying to go 16 and then losing all your energy.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're a late night cereal kind of guy too, so am I.
Yeah. I've stopped doing that, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yes. Now I actually try to go to bed early. And I would say it took me till 40 to grow up. But now I try to avoid that.
Oh, man. I don't know if I'm ready to kick that habit yet. I really like my late night cereal. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, I'm sure you'll be able to find him. He's going to be here for the rest of the day. And come and find Godard and ask him some questions. And thank you for sponsoring as well. The booth is beautiful. And for the wonderful reception last night, it was awesome too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and check out g2.com. Monty's there. So if there's one ask for you, go to Monty, and it's an alpha. If you have feedback for Monty, just put it into Monty. And the AI obviously learns itself. And my co-founder, CTO, he actually reads all the feedback too.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Godard.
Okay, thanks,
All right,
Matt.
give him a round of applause. Thank you.